Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Damon. I am 32 years old. And 4 years ago, I thought I had a pretty ordinary future lined up in front of me. I had a solid job in information technology, a woman I loved, a wedding folder saved on my laptop, and the kind of confidence that makes you assume your life will keep moving in a straight line if you just work hard enough. Then my kidneys started failing, and straight lines disappeared. By 28, I had a diagnosis that changed the structure of my days, my body, and eventually my engagement. When people hear chronic kidney disease, they usually think of something serious but abstract. They do not picture fluorescent lights at dawn, plastic recliners, antiseptic air, machines humming beside half-asleep patients, and a nurse tightening tape over fresh needle sites while you tell yourself this is just what survival looks like now. They do not picture the exhaustion that settles into your bones so completely that walking from the parking lot to your apartment can feel like climbing a hill with wet sand in your pockets. Illness shrinks life in humiliating little ways before it blows it apart in big ones. By the time I started hemodialysis, I had already spent months trying medications, restrictions, appointments, blood work, and that false kind of optimism doctors sometimes offer because they do not want to drop the full weight of reality on you all at once. My nephrologist was careful, kind, and honest, which is how I knew things were bad. He looked at my numbers, paused for a beat too long, and then started explaining access surgery, transplant lists, and treatment schedules. After that, my weeks belonged to Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. 4 hours each session, sometimes more if something was off. I sat there with tubes running from my arm to a machine that cleaned while my own body could no longer clean. I learned how cold dialysis rooms get after the first hour. I learned that you can be starving and nauseated at the same time. I learned that a person can feel grateful to be alive and furious about the price of staying that way. Most of all, I learned that sickness is never just physical. It gets into your patience, your pride, your routines, your relationships, and the private picture you have of yourself. Before I got sick, I weighed 185 pounds at 5 feet 11 inches. I was not a fitness model. I was just normal. I played pickup basketball sometimes, wore medium shirts, took stairs without thinking about it, and had the kind of body you never appreciate until it starts changing in ways you cannot control. During the first year and a half of treatment, I gained about 38 pounds. Some of that was fluid retention. Some of it was fallout from prednisone, and the other attempts to stabilize things before dialysis became my permanent reality. Some of it was depression, because when your energy is wrecked and your future feels blurry, convenience starts looking a lot like comfort. A fast food burger at 10 o'clock at night can feel less like a bad decision and more like the only good part of a day built around pain, restrictions, and appointments. My face got puffy. My stomach softened. My clothes stopped fitting right. I knew exactly what I looked like. I was not in denial. I just had more urgent things to worry about than whether I still resembled the version of myself from old beach photos. Ariel was with me before the diagnosis turned into a full-time life. We met through mutual friends at a birthday dinner in Baltimore, and she had that kind of easy confidence that made every room feel slightly tilted toward her. She was smart, polished, funny when she wanted to be, and very good at making people feel chosen. We got close fast. She was the person I called when my car broke down, when I got a promotion, when my mother irritated me, when I wanted Thai food at midnight, when I thought the future looked bright and manageable. When the kidney disease got serious, she came to appointments, asked questions, took notes, and squeezed my hand while doctors talked about creatinine levels and long-term outcomes. After my first dialysis session, she sat with me in the parking lot while I tried not to shake from exhaustion. She cried before I did. She held my face in both hands and told me we would get through this together. I believed her so completely that I did not even register it as faith. It just felt like fact. That was the worst part later, not just what she said, but how long I had trusted her before she said it. I defended her loyalty to people who never even questioned it. My mother once asked me, in a careful voice, whether I was sure wedding planning was smart while I was still adjusting to treatment, and I told her Ariel was not the kind of person who would fold under pressure. When my older cousin said illness changes relationships in ugly ways, I told him he did not know her like I did. I remember one night about 6 months into dialysis when I was too weak to walk up the apartment stairs without stopping halfway. Ariel came down, put my arm over her shoulders, and helped me the rest of the way. Later, when I thanked her, she looked offended and told me I never had to thank her for loving me. That moment stayed in my head for a long time. I returned to it more than once, especially near the end, because I kept trying to figure out whether she changed or whether I just stopped seeing clearly once the pressure exposed what had always been underneath. We got engaged not long after dialysis became routine. In hindsight, that timing should have worried me more than it did. At the time, it felt romantic, almost defiant. Life had turned harsh, and we were choosing each other anyway. I wanted something that looked like momentum. I wanted a future marker brighter than lab results and medication schedules. Ariel wanted the certainty of a plan, and I wanted to believe love could anchor both of us through the medical storm. So I bought a ring I probably should have spent less on, proposed during a weekend trip to Chicago, and watched her cry in a hotel suite with both hands over her mouth. For a while, that memory carried me. The wedding was planned for about a year later. We toured venues. She made color palettes. I pretended I cared deeply about linen textures and menu cards. We laughed about dance lessons and argued gently over seating charts. All of it existed inside the shadow of dialysis. But I told myself that was what commitment looked like. Not waiting for perfect health, just building a life around reality and choosing joy where you could find it. The weight became an issue about 8 months into treatment, and at first she disguised it so well I let myself call it concern. She would bring home healthier groceries without asking. She suggested short walks on days when I had enough energy to leave the couch, though. Sometimes the timing made it obvious she was choosing the 1 hour after dialysis, when standing upright already felt heroic. She left fitness videos open on her phone where I could see them. She made comments that could be defended if you stripped them of context. She would say I looked swollen today, or ask whether I thought a shirt still fit the way it used to, or remind me that staying active mattered during chronic illness. On paper, some of those lines sounded supportive. In real life, they were delivered while I sat there with fresh needle marks on my arm, trying not to throw up from treatment. It was not concern anymore once I noticed the look on her face. Concern leans toward you. Disappointment leans back. She looked at me like I was becoming an inconvenience she had not budgeted for. There were moments I should have taken more seriously. Once, at a small dinner with 2 of her friends, one of them complimented an old photo of us from before I got sick. Ariel laughed lightly and said I had definitely been in my prime back then. She said it like a joke, and everyone did the social thing where they smiled too quickly and moved on. I told myself I was being sensitive. Another time, I overheard her on the phone with her mother in the kitchen. I was not eavesdropping on purpose. I had woken up from a nap and heard my name. Ariel said something about not wanting to start married life, already feeling like a caretaker. Her mother said a woman should be honest about what she could and could not live with. Then Ariel lowered her voice, and I missed the rest. When I asked later whether she was talking about me, she kissed my cheek and said her mother worried too much. She told me I was reading shadows into everything because I was tired. I apologized. Looking back, I hate that part almost as much as the ultimatum itself. I apologized for noticing. 6 months before the wedding, we had already booked the venue and paid a $3,500 deposit. She had bought her dress. The apartment was filling with samples, catalogs, and wedding logistics. One evening, after I came home from dialysis, she asked me to sit down because she wanted to talk seriously. That phrase should have put me on guard, but I was exhausted enough that I mostly just wanted whatever it was to be over quickly. I had spent the afternoon nauseated, counting every sip of water because fluid restrictions rule your life in humiliating units. Ariel sat across from me at the dining table with her hands folded the way people do when they want to look measured and reasonable while saying something cruel. She told me she needed me to lose 40 pounds before the wedding. Just like that. Clear, direct, no soft launch. I remember staring at her because my brain truly took a second to catch up. She went on before I could answer. She said she had been patient. She said she had tried to be supportive. Then she said she was not going to walk down the aisle next to someone who did not take care of himself. I asked her if she hurt herself. She said yes, and that was part of what made it so cold. She had thought it through. She said other people on dialysis manage their weight. She said she had looked it up, which was somehow more insulting than if she had said nothing at all, as if a few late-night internet searches put her in a position to lecture me about living inside a failing body. She said there were renal diets, light exercise plans, and better choices than the ones I had been making. Then she said the line I still hear sometimes when I am half asleep. She said if I could not put in the effort for our wedding, maybe she needed to find someone who took care of himself. I remember that the kitchen light above the stove was on, and the hum of the refrigerator suddenly sounded louder than anything else in the room. I remember looking at the woman who once cried in a dialysis parking lot and understanding, all at once, that her version of together had conditions attached. Not impossible conditions. Worse, convenient ones. I did not scream. I did not argue in circles. Something in me went very quiet instead. I told her I would work on my health. The exact wording matters, because that was true. I was already working on my health every hour of every week just by staying alive, following treatment, managing medications, and keeping myself from collapsing under the mental weight of it all. But she heard what she wanted to hear. She smiled, patted my knee, and said that was all she was asking. Then she picked up her phone and started scrolling through wedding ideas like she had just solved a scheduling issue. I sat there after she left the room and thought about the first dialysis session, the parking lot, her hands on my face, the promise that we would get through it together. I thought about how betrayal is rarely a lightning strike. Usually it is a sentence that makes every sentence before it rearranges itself in your memory. That night I did not sleep much. I lay awake and watched the ceiling until it turned from dark gray to morning. Then I got up, made coffee I barely drank, and called the venue. The woman on the phone explained the cancellation policy in the neutral, practiced tone of somebody who has seen enough weddings fall apart to know better than to ask questions. We were 5 months out. The deposit was non-refundable. I understood. I canceled anyway. Losing that money hurt, but not as much as marrying someone who had turned my illness into a character flaw. After that call, I called Bryce, my best friend from college. Bryce had shown up more consistently than anybody except my mother during dialysis. He was the one who sat through 4-hour sessions with terrible action movies on his laptop, who smuggled and approved snacks, who never once said anything fake and inspirational when playing company would do. When I told him what Ariel had said, there was a long silence. Then he asked me whether I was done. I said yes. He said he would come get the ring whenever I was ready. That was Bryce in one sentence. No speech, no theatrics, just immediate alignment with what mattered. Later that evening, when Ariel was in the kitchen, making one of the pointedly healthy dinners she had started cooking like my plate was a moral referendum, I told her I had canceled the venue and ended the engagement. At first, she genuinely looked confused, as if she had skipped a scene and could not understand how the plot had advanced without her permission. She turned away from the stove and asked what I was talking about. I repeated it more plainly. I had canceled the venue. We were not getting married. When she realized I was serious, she started trying to reframe the conversation at high speed. She said I was twisting what she meant. She said she had only been trying to motivate me. She said weddings were stressful, and she had spoken badly. I asked her whether motivation was what she called threatening to replace a man on dialysis if he did not become more visually convenient in time for photos. That made her cry, and for a moment I hated that tears still had the power to scramble my clarity. But I stayed seated and let her cry. When she caught her breath, she said I could not make a decision like this without her. That line almost made me laugh. I told her she had made a decision without me the moment she turned marriage into a condition based on how well my body performed under illness. I asked for the ring back. She refused that night, so I gave her a few days and slept on the couch. The apartment lease was in her name, so leaving was simpler than staying and more dignified than fighting over space that already felt poisoned. The next morning I packed a bag, took my laptop, clothes, medications, and a few things that were unquestionably mine, and went to Bryce's house. He had a spare room that looked like what happens when a guest room and a storage closet compromise. But it was quiet, and quiet was exactly what I needed. 3 days later, Ariel mailed the ring to Bryce's address in a padded envelope with no note inside. I sold it later for $2,800 after paying $4,600 for it, which felt fitting in a bleak kind of way. Love loss, resale loss, deposit loss. There's a tax on learning too late. Ariel went through her post-breakup sequence exactly the way Bryce predicted. First came the angry texts about honesty and overreaction. Then came the softer texts about missing me and wanting to talk. Then came the strategic ones. She told me she had informed her parents and that her father wanted to speak to me. He did call. He was retired, formal, and the sort of man who believed almost every problem could be improved by patience. He said marriages required compromise. I told him the exact words his daughter had used, not the cleaned-up version. The real line about finding someone else. He got quiet fast. Her father did not defend her after that. He did not apologize either, but his whole tone changed. He said he had not heard it put that way. I told him that was probably because Ariel was very good at editing. We ended the call respectfully enough. Her mother was another story. She texted me a day later and called me a sick man who had just thrown away the best thing in his life. Then she said no other woman would sign up for what I came with, and that I should have been grateful Ariel stayed as long as she did. I read that message several times, partly because it hurt and partly because it explained everything. Ariel's entitlement had a family tree. In that house, illness reduced your value and caregiving became currency. Suddenly, the kitchen phone call I had overheard months earlier made perfect sense. I blocked her mother without responding. I sent Ariel one final text telling her I wished her well and did not want further contact. She ignored that request. She called from new numbers twice and emailed once. I did not answer. For the first time in months, I chose silence over explanation, and it felt less like bitterness than self-preservation. The recovery part of my life did not start as a glow-up. It started as grief, fatigue, and the strange emptiness that follows leaving someone you once believed would be your wife. Bryce's house became my halfway place. I slept, went to dialysis, went back to Bryce's house, and repeated the cycle. My mother flew in for a weekend and cried when she saw how thin my patience had become even though my body had gone the other way. She did not ask whether I regretted ending things. She just helped me organize my medications and stock Bryce's kitchen with low-sodium food that did not taste like punishment. A few mutual friends reached out. Most were decent. One admitted Ariel had described the breakup as me being emotionally unstable from treatment. That got under my skin, but Bryce reminded me that people who need to sand down their own cruelty always start by reframing the reaction. I focused on surviving the weeks. I was already active on the transplant list, and my doctors had warned me for months that a match could happen at any time or not for a long time at all. That uncertainty becomes its own weather. You do not build hope around it, because hope gets expensive when it has no schedule. 2 months after the breakup, my nephrologist's office called. A kidney had become available. It was a strong match, and I needed to get to the hospital immediately. There are moments that split life so cleanly you can still feel the edge years later. That phone call was one of mine. Bryce drove me in near silence, except for the part where he asked twice whether I had my wallet and once whether I was going to throw up. I called my mother from the passenger seat. She booked the next flight she could get. By 11 that night, I was being prepped for surgery. By 4 in the morning, I woke up with pain in my abdomen, a dry mouth, and a new organ inside me from a family I would never know but would thank for the rest of my life. The recovery was not magical or cinematic. It hurt. It was slow. It involved fear, incisions, constant monitoring, and a new mountain of pills. But once the kidneys started working consistently, the difference in my body was undeniable. The swelling went down. The exhaustion loosened its grip week by week. My appetite stopped behaving like a broken signal. Within 3 months, I had lost 22 pounds without chasing the scale like it was a courtroom verdict. I was simply functioning better. I walked because I finally could. I followed the post-transplant diet because it made sense, and because my body was no longer fighting me every hour. I slept through the night for the first time in years. By month 5, I was down 35 pounds. My face looked like mine again. My shoulders came back. My old jeans fit. But the more important transformation was harder to photograph. I no longer felt like I was living under somebody else's definition of acceptable. Recovery gave me energy, yes, but it also gave me distance. I could look back at the engagement without the fog of constant illness distorting everything. Ariel had not left because I was unlovable. I had left because she made love conditional on convenience. That distinction mattered. Bryce told me one day that I looked like myself again, only steadier. That was a better description than thinner. Steadier. Less easily shaken by people who confuse image with loyalty. The Instagram post that complicated everything was not my idea. My transplant center runs a public account focused on patient stories, donor awareness, and recovery milestones. One of the coordinators asked whether I would be willing to share a before and after set of photos for a feature during Organ Donation Awareness Month. The before photo was from early dialysis, when my face was swollen and I looked older than I should have. The after photo was from a checkup 5 months post-transplant, standing in the clinic hallway in jeans and a navy pullover, smiling in that cautious way people do when they are finally beginning to trust good news. I said yes because the post was not about me being attractive. It was about showing people what survival can look like on the other side of a transplant. A family somewhere had said yes to donation during the worst moment of their lives. The least I could do was attach my face to the reality of what that gift made possible. The center posted it on a Thursday morning. By Friday, the response had gotten much bigger than any of us expected. It had not become celebrity-level viral, but it spread far enough to make my life weird for a while. A chronic illness page shared it. Then a fitness account reposted it with a caption about real transformation. Then a regional news page picked it up because the medical angle was strong and organ donation stories travel well when they are framed correctly. The transplant center tagged my personal Instagram account, which only had a few hundred followers at the time, mostly friends, family, and old coworkers. Suddenly, I had thousands of notifications. People messaged me their own dialysis stories, transplant stories, and donor stories. Some wrote paragraphs. Some wrote one line. A man told me his daughter was waiting for a kidney and that my pictures gave him hope. A woman told me her brother had donated after a car accident and that seeing recipients thrive helped her family breathe easier. I cried more than once reading those messages. Ariel saw the post. Of course she did. Everybody did. She did not contact me immediately, but one of her closest friends sent me a message saying I looked amazing and that Ariel had been crying all day. The message had a little acid in it. I ignored it. For a brief stretch, the story got away from me online. In the comments under one repost, somebody who apparently knew somebody in Ariel's circle wrote that my fiancée had dumped me because I got sick and gained weight. That was not technically accurate. She had not left first. I had. But the deeper truth beneath the rumor was close enough that it spread anyway. I had ended the engagement because she made my illness-related body change as a condition of love. Once strangers latch onto a clean narrative, nuance loses every time. A local morning show reached out and asked whether I would do a short segment about organ donation and recovery. I agreed because the medical point still mattered to me. In the interview, I talked about dialysis, transplant waiting, donor families, and what it feels like to wake up with a second chance. I did not mention Ariel at all. Neither did the host. But I could not control the comments under the clips once they were posted online, and that is where the story about my ex grew legs. I mostly stayed out of it, because feeding it would have turned my donor's gift into gossip. Ariel broke no contact about a week later by calling me from her work number. I answered because I did not recognize it. She skipped hello and went straight to telling me I needed to correct what people were saying. I asked what exactly she wanted corrected. She said people were acting like she had abandoned a sick man. I reminded her that she told a man on dialysis to lose 40 pounds before the wedding or she would find someone else. She immediately tried to clean it up. She said she had only asked me to take better care of myself. She said people were misunderstanding. Then she said the thing that told me everything I needed to know. She said colleagues at her office had seen the post, connected the dots, and started looking at her differently. Not once in that call did she ask how I was doing now that I had a transplant. Not once did she say she was glad I was healthy. Her problem was the optics. Her problem was that my recovery had turned into an unflattering mirror. I told her I was not her public relations department, and ended the call. 2 days after that, her mother called from a new number because apparently being blocked only made her more committed. She accused me of humiliating the family on purpose. She said I had lost the weight just to embarrass her daughter, which would have been almost funny if it were not so grotesque. I told her my weight loss came from receiving an organ transplant, not from a revenge plan designed around her child. Then I said something I had not planned to say, but did not regret. I told her that the real humiliation was not the post. The humiliation was that her daughter had looked at a man fighting to stay alive and decided his waistline was the problem. She went silent for a second, then called me cruel. I said our definitions of cruelty were obviously different and hung up. That should have been the end of it, but a mutual friend named Saad called me later that week with a piece of fallout I had not expected. She had confronted Ariel directly after hearing the sanitized version Ariel was telling around town. Saad had been one of the bridesmaids. She told Ariel, in front of two other friends, that no amount of rebranding changed the fact that she gave a sick man a body ultimatum and got left for it. Then Saad dropped out of Ariel's circle entirely. That landed harder than online whispers ever could. The sharpest attempted return came a month later, after the noise had started dying down. Ariel emailed me from a personal account I had forgotten to block. The subject line was just checking in, which almost made me delete it unread. But I opened it. The email was careful, polished, and manipulative in the way only smart people can manage. She said she had been doing a lot of thinking. She said seeing my transformation had reminded her of the man she first fell in love with. She said maybe both of us had been under extraordinary stress and had lost sight of what mattered. She said the healthiest thing might be to meet for coffee and talk honestly now that I was in a better place. There it was. Not relief that I was alive. Not remorse for what she had done. Not real accountability. She valued the version of me that had become easier to display again. The wording made it obvious without her meaning to. Seeing my transformation had reminded her, as if my restored body reopened my eligibility. I stared at that line for a long time. Then I wrote back exactly 4 sentences. I said I was glad I had survived. I said stress did not invent values. It exposed them. I said there was nothing to revisit. Then I wished her well and blocked that address too. Not every aftermath beat was about her. And I am glad for that, because revenge is a poor substitute for peace. Some of the most meaningful moments had nothing to do with Ariel at all. One night, I got a message from a woman whose partner had lupus. She said treatment had changed his body, his stamina, even his hair, and that people around her kept suggesting she leave before she wasted her best years. She said the transplant center post reminded her that illness is not the whole person and that bodies under medical strain are not final drafts. That message got to me, more than the comments and reposts ever did. It felt like the real purpose of the post surviving intact under all the internet noise. I wrote back and told her partner was lucky to have someone who understood the difference between burden and love. Around that same time, I used the money from selling the ring toward the first and last month's rent on a studio apartment in Washington, D.C. It was small, bright in the afternoons, and empty except for borrowed furniture at first. Bryce helped me move in, and we ate takeout on the floor because neither of us felt like performing adulthood any more than necessary. As far as I know, Ariel's life was not destroyed. She was not fired. She was not publicly shamed in some dramatic movie scene. What happened was quieter and, in some ways, more fitting. Enough people in her orbit learned the real story that she lost control of the elegant version she preferred. The office whispers bothered her because her image mattered deeply. Saad cutting ties hurt because that was a real-world verdict from someone who had seen our relationship up close. Her father never contacted me again, but one mutual acquaintance later mentioned that he had been furious once he understood the full context. Apparently, he told Ariel that if she could not tell the truth about what she said, she at least needed the decency to stop playing victim after the consequences arrived. That more than anything online felt earned. Not because I want her crushed, but because betrayal should cost something concrete. In my own life, the cost I carried looked different. I lost the deposit. I lost the future I thought I had. I lost years to illness and months to recovery. But I also gained a sharper understanding of dignity, and that has turned out to be worth more than the wedding would have been. Now I sit in my apartment on a Wednesday night with stable lab results, a scar across my abdomen, more than 20 pills lined up in a weekly organizer, and a life that feels unglamorous in the best possible way. My transplant team is happy with my numbers. My mother calls too often. Bryce still treats my refrigerator like communal property. I weigh 191 pounds, which is a number my doctor considers healthy and which I am slowly learning not to treat like a moral verdict. Sometimes I catch my reflection unexpectedly and feel startled by the fact that I made it here. Not because I am thinner, because I am here. Because somebody's family said yes in the middle of their worst day. Because I walked away when someone tried to make my body a negotiation. Ariel thought she was setting the terms of our future when she told me to lose 40 pounds. She thought the wedding gave her leverage and my illness reduced my options. What she never considered was that love stops being love the minute it becomes conditional on your body being convenient for somebody else's image. I did work on my health. I just did it without her, on my own terms, and that turned out to be the beginning of getting my life back. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.